Hi, it's wonderful to see you. I'm seeing all sorts of weird banners here. And now they're gone. It's great to be here, and it's great to be here in um our community in Connecticut. I know that you have a ton of followers and fans and readers here who are very excited about this book. And I would love to know. I mean, I follow both of you. I've read everything that Anne's written. Read everything that Neal's written. I've read. And the question that I want to start with is, how did this book come about? Because I was very surprised when it sort of emerged. And yeah, why don't you just tell us that story?
So my first career was in journalism in the Hudson Valley is where I started out. And I was working for, at the time, a really sprightly little paper. It was very dynamic for a 20,000 circulation daily called the Kingston Daily Freeman. It still exists, still a nice little paper. And I was green and fresh out of grad school and had zero newspaper experience. And I remember about maybe a month into my tenure there, my 2 years there, um, a great editor there, Sam DeLeo, called me over and he said, Neal, the trick is to write with your verbs. And he explained to me the difference between a weak verb and a vivid verb. So the difference between walked, which is kind of, you don't quite know what's going on, and you pretty much have to add an adjective or an adverb if you want to get anybody excited about walking, or ate, don't. And he explained to me, no, you want trudged or shuffled, and then for ate you want scarfed or consumed, right? And that was my one rule of writing that wasn't grammatical. I had all the grammatical rules down. And it was my one rule of how to turn a boring sentence into a persuasive sentence, a sentence that somebody is going to actually read the next sentence. And over the years, I picked up a few more. They're very common ones. You pick up, if you take any fiction workshop, you're going to hear show, don't tell, which actually is kind of wrong. It's actually show, then tell. You're allowed to riff on the consequences of what you have just shown, right? But at any rate, I picked up these rules, and they weren't rules of grammar. They weren't necessary for a sentence. What they were there for were to improve a sentence. Use Anglo-Saxon words, which are punchier, rather than Latinate words, which go la di da. If you see a sentence with a whole lot of little prepositions and other words in it, if there are too many of them, that's a sign that you need to rework the sentence. Start putting the noun in a different place, or the subject in a different place, or the verb in a different place to get rid of some of those words. Or maybe you have too many adjectives in there that require a particular preposition. So I picked up these rules, and I used them in my head over the years. And then I left journalism after about 15 years, and I went into a corporate career. By the time I came out of my corporate career, I was still writing along the way. I realized I had a lot of these rules. And so I wrote them all down to remind myself of them. Right? Some of them I use to take another pass through anything that I'm writing, because I know I'm weak on that rule, right? I always go through my work and look for the verbs to be and to have, which stop a sentence cold, right? And find a way to replace them with an active verb. And I, I carried them as a list on my website. And 10 years ago, I met Annie, and we were talking on one of our early dates about writing. And I said, oh, I have this list of rules. Why don't you continue from there?
Uh, so I immediately took the rules as my own and started passing them out to all the students at my bird by bird workshops, and everybody was very grateful for them. And then a couple years ago, Neal came out with complete surprise and said, I've written my rules as a book. And however, there were only 34. I do want to take credit for two of them, which I'll explain. And I read the book and I loved it because it was so practical and so welcoming. And it actually was something that I started consulting on second and third drafts. And then I said, hey, you know what, Neal, I know something about writing too. Can I add my 2 cents? And then I started writing essays or meditations after his essays and meditations on each rule. And then I added two. One was take out the boring stuff, and one was write the hard stuff. Write about life and death and loss and how we come through and how we survive these cold, weird days and but they were it's mostly Neal did all the heavy lifting, and then I did the part that was sort of more fun. Neal is a explainer and I'm an encourager, and I get in there and I go up to everybody and I say, I really think you could do it, and I really think it matters that you tell your stories and that you get all your memories down on paper, at least for your grandchildren or nieces and nephews, and who knows if it'll turn into something else. But I think if you do it every day, bird by bird, terrible first drafts, it's going to really change your life in a way that surprises and delights you.
I think I think most books are written by people who notice that that book isn't out there. And so all three of my books, that's completely true of. I would not have written those books if something similar was out there. There was something that I thought I had a twist on something, or I knew something that wasn't commonly out there. In the case of this book, most of these rules are out there, but what I noticed was that the literary authors whose lists everyone knows were much their lists were much shorter. So Hemingway has his 4 rules, and Elmore Leonard has his 8 rules, and Margaret Atwood has her 10 rules. And the longest list I could find, I just started searching around because I thought it was weird that there wasn't a book with all these rules in it. Martin Amis has, depending on which year, 14, 15, or 16 rules. Nobody had what could pass for a comprehensive list of kind of easy rubric rules to follow if you're trying to punch up a second draft.
Well, I'm gonna just jump in. In the within Rule 3, and which is keep it active, and I this jumped out at me because I sort of moonlight in the other side of my life as a musician, and I'm always listening to the way sentences sound. I'm listening to word choice and sentence rhythm, and in this rule, and you say good writing, and I tattoo this somewhere on my body. Good writing is about taking each sentence and making it as strong or true as you can. And Neal's background, Neal's a wonderful writer, and his background is as a journalist. And there, I come from a many years of as an editor and a publisher, and they're very different styles and types of writing. So, Anne, could you talk a little bit about the places where Neal's rules dovetail with the way you teach and the way you think about good sentences, and the places also where you don't?
Well, as I mentioned a number of times in the book, Neal is overeducated, and he is very logical and very sort of philosophical. And the rules that he's written are practical and they're very welcoming. But then I come in and I am, as I said, I'm an encourager. And Neal's a little stricter than I am. And what I always encourage every writer to do is just to get it down. A terrible first draft, you just get it all down. Every one of those Washington Post pieces I wrote on getting older for a year, they could be 900 to 1,000 words. Every single first draft was like 18, 1900. And I would have to basically cut them in half. And so, but that's how I get everything done. Neal was a journalist for 15 years, and he is used to the editor breathing down his neck, and he can write in a much more efficient and complete way than I can. I write these terrible loopy first drafts, And then these rules are about, like in Bird by Bird, I said there's the child's draft where you get every single thing done down on paper. The second draft is the parent's draft where the parent comes in and sits next to you and says, well, I think we can take that out, or I'd like to know a little bit more about this. And the third draft is where you go tooth by tooth. That's a dental draft, and you jiggle it or wiggle it or floss it. And some of the teeth are healthy and some of them need a little repair. And in this book, Good Writing, it's me encouraging people to write. And we give a lot of examples about what we, the reader, love to come upon, and about how we both, to this day, sit at the feet of the masters and study how Barbara Kingsolver or Virginia Woolf does it. But I I really go through this, my work now, with Neal's rules in the dental draft, where I go sentence by sentence. You know, people feel overwhelmed by the very idea of writing when they first set out. And of course, I say short assignments, terrible first drafts. And then you take each sentence, you go through it sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, passage by passage, and you just keep making it a little bit better, a little bit better. There's a lot in this book about collaboration and editors. I know we've talked about this, Elissa, that you really worship a talented editor because they save you from yourself. Neal's my first editor, and I hate being criticized. I mean, I'm so in the wrong line of work, but Neal will begin by saying he's going to love it, or he loves something, and then he will tell me systematically the stuff he got stuck on. And I think that this book, Good Writing, will help people look for the stuff that the reader would get stuck on. Although I love for every single person reading this book to find somebody they can work with as co-editors, co-writing partners.
And yeah, I mean, I think of this, as a whether you're an author and an editor or a writer partners, husband and wife as yourself. Um, this is a creative marriage. This is whether you're an editor and a writer or otherwise. And I think it's amazing to be able to be gifted with a partner who's a great reader, and
Yeah.
everything that I write. I mean, I'm in one end of the house. Susan Turner, my wife, is in the other end of the house, and I don't hit publish. I don't hit send
Yeah.
before she reads
Yeah.
Yeah.
everything that I write, and she can be very tough, which I'm very grateful for. um, I would love it if you wouldn't mind reading a little bit from Rule 4, which is stick with said. And it speaks for itself, so I will let you explain what it is. But this is, if any of my students are here, they will recognize why I love this rule as much as I do.
So the book is designed where my essay always comes first and Annie always gets the last word.
Yeah.
But that also works because I explain it and Annie makes it amenable to you.
Uh-huh.
Right? So rule 4, stick with said. When attributing a quote, said is the default verb. The reader's attention is on who said it, not how it was said. Said is enough, chuckled, smiled, ranted, explained. All of them are too much. Don't look for synonyms and drop explanatory adverbs from attributions. This is one time to favor a weak verb. Said is enough because the quote is what's important. The verb accompanying the attribution, said or chuckled, is expected but kind of not registered, like prepositions and other word and idea connectors. Said has a mechanical grammatical function and isn't intended to project a particular meaning. It's a weak verb that doesn't need to be replaced. Um, this is a newspaper word that's extremely strict in newspapers because if you say commented or opined or let's see, if you say claimed, it gives a sense of suspicion, right? Skepticism. If you say argued, it gives a sense of a defensive posture. And so, in the kind of false objectivity of daily newspaper, the veneer of objectivity, said is recorded. If you look at the front page of the New York Times today or any day, you and look for attributions after quotes, you're going to see said. Here's Annie.
Okay. Um, Many verbs to replace said sound like the efforts of a person whose first language was not English. Chuckled is the worst of all. Never ever use chuckled in place of said. But I challenge Neal on this rule as there are a number of synonyms I am fine with. Stated, announced, remarked, or observed. Now this, of course, put an
Wait, you left out the next sentence.
Okay. He responded by calling me a Philistine. We have not spoken since.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a reader, I notice when somebody is using synonyms for said, and it's just so desperate. Oh, he and chuckled really is the works, but said, and also in a page of dialogue, we should know who's speaking by the rhythms of and the vocabulary of that in which they speak. And then it's okay to say he said or she said, just to keep helping the reader get located again.
Yeah, I love this. I mean, I get in my workshops, I get ranted, explained, ruminated, huffed, puffed, snorted, gulped,
Yeah,
raved,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it makes me want to put my head in the oven,
I
basically.
know, I know.
Basically, and said is great. And there are some that I mean all of these rules are so smart and so necessary. Don't show off, no gimmicks,
Yeah,
trust your voice, love the material. Your rule on semicolons, I am a semicolon fanatic, and I always
yeah.
let my editors know way ahead of time so that they don't send out an army to look for me. Metaphor, the metaphor rule is just so wonderful, and it's such a great read. I mean, there are very few places where I have read a book about great writing, and the authors mentioned MacArthur Park and a horse with no name, which both metaphors. Um, so you are a married creative couple, and I think most writers who share their work with their partners, which is pretty much all of us, know that there are sticking points. There are squirmy sticking points. Annie, how was this for you in terms of in terms of the writing of this book, the back and forth? How did that work for you in terms of creative conflict?
Well, there really wasn't any. It's weird because you would expect there to be, and because we write in such different voices, but Neal did all the heavy lifting. It was his idea, his book, and his essays. And then I came in, and I get to be kind of smart alecky, but I also get to be the third grade den mother and with the cupcakes and encourage people not to give up and to get started. And their voice is important, how to find their own voice, how to create habits of sticking to it, because that's 90% of the problem is keeping your butt in the chair for an hour a day or whatever you can afford. And we didn't really have any conflict, except sometimes I wouldn't be able to come up with a good example. I would write something but not have a good example, and I'd text Neal, and we or I'd come over to the Bat Cave where he works, and we'd jam, and I would take what it would always be something exactly what I had been looking for. And then sometimes Neal would be too Neal, like too fancy and erudite, and I would say, we're going to lose people. This essay can be 3 paragraphs, but it really can't be 4.
Mhm.
And then he's always kind of grumbly and surprised, and he would always do it because as a writer, Alyssa, that your eye just starts to glance over stuff on your second draft. You're not
Yeah,
noticing that you repeated something, or that it was incongruous, that the uncle that you're writing about in the metaphor section on the first page has blue eyes, and then at the end, watery brown eyes. And so, editors and a co-writer, whether it's a spouse, they just save you from yourself. And so all I felt was gratitude. And then, you know what? I've never said this before while writing a book. It was really
It
fun.
was fun. We know we've worked with each other's writing for so long. We've been together 10 years, so we'd already been working together for 8 years before we started on this book. We know each other's blind spots, and that's
Yeah,
mostly
yeah,
what editors do is they take care of my blind spots, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to I can't take care of my own blind spots.
yeah,
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 and that's, I mean, that's what, that's what makes them blind spots. I mean, you think about
Yeah.
it in terms of
yeah,
driving, you
And
know,
yeah,
and we've done this long enough that when Annie says you're over explaining, I'm like, cool, show me where most of
yeah,
the time, not all
yeah.
the time, but most of the time. The other thing was we the book is designed not to be scolding, right? These
Mm-hmm,
are not necessary rules. This isn't a grammar. This isn't a technical manual. This
mm-hmm,
is, hey, you want to see a sentence, once you've got a grammatical sentence started, that's the starting point. Now it's got a potential to turn into something more. These
mm-hmm,
are, hey, maybe you can use this trick. Maybe you can use this trick. That
mm-hmm,
whole sense, that meant if Annie disagreed with me, and she does on a number of them, that's fine,
mm-hmm,
right? I don't care. I
mm-hmm,
really don't care whether anybody adopts these rules. That's up to them.
so that was actually my next question. What happens when you both come to a rule that you creatively disagree on? Can you give us an example of that?
um,
We just heard one was said.
yeah,
So
yeah,
Annie, and I if this is a funny thing, I took to heart that we had a system. And so I thought about it and I thought, you know what? Yeah, I sometimes do use words other than said, and it is appropriate in non-daily journalism, fake objective news at times. And I was tempted to go back and rewrite my essay, but I thought, you know what? My being sort of a rigid know-it-all and her being looser and worked in terms of the flow of the book.
yeah,
I learned from her.
yeah,
When you write a book, you're learning, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
You
yeah,
one reason is you don't think it's out there. The second reason is you know damn well that you have to get over it somehow. To get over it, you got to finish exploring it. And
you know, yeah, what, one of the rules that I just really spoke to me was Rule 35, which is finish the thing. Finish the thing. I mean,
yeah,
I've had
yeah, yeah,
students who would rather spend 2 years on getting the title right
yeah,
and
yeah,
what they envision the jacket's going to look like
yeah.
without actually writing the book. So would you talk
Mhm.
a little bit about that?
yeah, yeah. The title of the chapter is "Finish the Damn Things," but the explanation is I always have a one sentence or two sentence explanation for it. Your job is to complete the project. The final quality and consequences are not yet your business,
Mhm,
Mhm.
right?
mhm.
That's what editors and publishers are there for. There's still room to move. But first, you got to. So Annie tells this exact same rule. For the first draft, the exact same rule is shitty first drafts. Just spill it out. For
Mhm.
this, it's sort of the same thing. I say fear of failure drives procrastination, writer's block, and other forms of not writing. A writing job requires a commitment, but that's not as big a deal as it sounds. Listen to this. I noticed this thing. The agreement to write the piece or the book was made at the beginning. When I made that choice, I had factored in my time, my talent, my interest, and my ability to concentrate. None of those was in question. Only after jumping in do I start to doubt my time, my talent, my interest, or my ability to concentrate.
Mhm.
That's weird, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's sort
Mhm.
of there's a bit of alacrity that's present when you commit to something and then you lose that suddenly
Mhm.
out of a
Mhm.
fear of failure.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I mean, I think that is so true, and that's where distraction comes in, and I can be distracted by any number of things, for sale on Instagram at any given time. And, once I'm gone, that's it. And what it comes down to is that I'm afraid. I mean, it's fear.
Yeah.
I'm afraid
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
finish.
And
To
you forget that 80% of the 90%, 95% of the quality of the piece is baked in before I start.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Between my starting and ending, I'm not going to learn to be a better writer, right?
Now, Neil is a total stickler about finish the damn thing, but all through this book and all through every workshop I teach, it's also about starting the damn thing,
Yeah.
because I'm sure this is true for you with your workshops and classes. Everybody spends a lot of time explaining to me why they haven't gotten started yet, but
Mhm.
how as soon as they retire or they move up to the Russian River or their last kid leaves home or the dog finally passes or whatever, they're going to get to work. And I say, you won't get to work then either. And I think it's going to feel terrible in your heart if you wake up someday and you never got around to becoming the writer you wanted to be, which is to say, writing every day for a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, I think both things are equally true. Neil is really a stickler about finishing things, and it, it's kind of a miracle to finish something. When somebody has finished a terrible draft, I say to them, this is a miracle that out of that all that blank white page, that unassaulted ice flow, you created something that you're sharing with me. And
Yeah.
also
Yeah. And it,
one
yeah.
thing
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think a lot of beginning writers don't understand is how much help they're going to get.
Yeah.
You know, that they go to the community college, they go to a writing collective, they find a writing partner, they find one in the chat room, on one of these podcasts, and they are going to be not just edited, but encouraged, and there are going to be suggestions that are going to change the whole thing. They're going to be marked up pages, and God willing, some Dave can edit at a quarterly or a publishing house, you have another 2 or 3 washes of this of what you submitted. What you submitted is going to be about a third different by the time it's published. So, but boy, you
Yeah.
just got,
That's so true.
yeah,
Yeah. People think that writing's a guy in a garret or a woman in a garret. And uh,
backlighting, yeah,
yeah, it's very seldom that. It's almost always extraordinarily collaborative.
yeah,
And, that was one thing that we also, um, I don't know, it tried to convey in the book, right? The
uh-huh,
book's obviously collaborative, so it gave us a
mhm,
kind of platform to talk about how there's going to be somebody who's going to pick you up when you're struggling with it.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're working, and I know, and you've got a pretty strict, you write every day, which is extraordinary to me. Because that's something that, there are some days that I can and some days that I can't. And I find that
mhm,
if I can't, and this is not true for everybody, but I find that if I can't, by the end of the day, I'm just grumbly and I won't. And whatever comes out is truly, truly a shitty first draft.
mhm.
Um, but Neil, what's your writing?
Yeah, I don't have a routine, in part because I've never managed to embrace a writer's life as a full-time thing. So I have um, clients. Most weekdays, I have a number of clients. It's kind of a day job of helping them with their inner critic, and that has nothing to do with writing. I mean, obviously, writers have inner critics, but that's not what I do have writers as some of my clients, but I also have clients doing all sorts of other things. And then I garden and I do various other things, and I always have other kinds of projects. So I'm kind of a streak hitter. I occasionally a project gets big enough. I was doing a final draft of a novel, and I kind of had to um, tell my clients to go away for a few weeks so that I could
Mhm.
get that draft done. Uh, so I'll write, and my Substack's like that. I'll write every third day for my Substack for 2 months, and then I won't write for 6 months, right?
Mhm.
Because I'm doing other things. So I'm juggling projects in my life. One or two of those projects is a writing project, but but it tends to fit in.
Listen, let me add that. However, I don't I write 5 days a week when I'm in the middle of something. Not I don't work on weekends. Um, but everybody has to find their own way to get a little bit of work done. By in Bird by Bird, I refer to it as the debt of honor, that you got one of the Willy Wonka golden tickets inside of you that wants to be creative, that used to be a good writer in college or high school, or started a novel in your 30s and longs to get back to it. And so you do it by prearrangement with yourself. I doubt you say to yourself, well, I'm going to wait till I have a real spark of inspiration. You know what? I would never have written a single paragraph. And I think it's just totally BS. My dad was a writer and he taught me it's a habit and it's a debt of honor. And every single writer, I started to say, has to find their own habit. Can you write for 45 minutes a day, 4 days a week? That would be a miracle. And
Yeah.
every single writer has to find their own voice. There's a lot of about that in good writing, is finding your own voice, and your own voice is good enough. You are not going to sound probably like Isabel Allende or Barbara Kingsolver. And I'm not either. I can only tell the truth and my version of things in my voice. But everything in our childhoods and our teachers and our professors, everything said that it wasn't quite good enough and that we should do better. We should try to sound more erudite or more ironic or whatever. And that is not what Neal and I have to teach. We have to teach that the best thing we have to offer is to help you find your own voice and help you establish the habit of sitting down and writing for a little bit most days.
And it's helpful to people I talk to about this to know that the great literary writers of this generation, the previous generation, generations back, I researched this. I went and found as many as I could of my, the pantheon. How, um, how, how much do you write in a day? And of course, there's the outliers like Thomas Wolfe, but um, almost all of them, it's between an hour and 2 hours. An hour and a half is not just the mean, it's probably also the average. Um, and about 1,000 to 1,500 words, right? That's that. When you think about an hour and a half, you're getting 45 minutes of writing in if you're getting 1,000
Yeah,
words out of it. You know, anybody can do that. That's possible for
yeah,
every single person listening to
yeah,
this.
yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 1,500 words. If I can get 1,500 words down in a day, then that has been a successful writing day for me. But and not but and if I'm struggling with something and I'm staring at the screen or staring at the paper, and that 1,500 words shrinks to 500 words, that's okay. Also, I've learned to not beat myself up over that.
Yeah.
But 1,500 is on average. That's what I usually try and hit. We actually have a couple of really good questions in here that in the chat that
Want me to start taking them?
yeah. Let's start with Nancy LaBalbo.
Nancy said, and she was referring to Strunk and White, Strunk and White's Elements of Style. Where or how does your book diverge from this classic book on writing?
So, so yeah, it's a good question. Elements of Style has four sections, right? It's got a spelling section, it's got a grammar section, it's got a usage section, and now I'm forgetting what the fourth section is. Oh, probably a style persuasion section. And it it hits at some rudiments in each of those sections. It isn't um, useful once you've memorized it, which most people have not intentionally memorized it, but picked up on all of the rules in the elements of style by the time they've done a few thousand hours of writing, right? It and it stops. Right. For all four of those categories, it kind of stops. I mean, it doesn't just kind of. So this is taking one of those categories, the persuasive one, right, the style one, more or less, and expanding it out as far as I could take it.
Well, Sarah's question is really interesting because it seems to follow up on that. Where do you decide to follow the rules, and when and how do you know when it's right to surprise self and others by diverging from the rules?
Well, there's a whole rule devoted to that that Neal has written pretty brilliantly about, which is Rule 34, break the rules. But it's like with piano, you really need to be able to do the scales for a few years before and to start mastering pieces of music the way they're written before you probably have the gift to fly, to just take off from the piling and fly. And we say over and over again in this book, you can do anything that you can get away with, i.e., if it's pleasant for the reader for you to do a tangent here, then do it. You don't have to stick to the structure you started out with. Neal has been working on a novel for a few years, and he finished it a couple months ago. It's actually out being shopped right now, and he gave it to me, and it's beautiful work. And there was this one Neely thing in it, Nealoid thing in it, which were these tangents that are kind of like he's a ATM of information. And I went through and I said, you have to take them all out. They slow down the plot, they don't add to the character, and they interrupt the flow. And at first he was like, well, he likes to do these tangents and these very, very brilliant lectures. And I said, you have to take them all out. And so he sort of stomped off in his manly way and he took them all out. And the book is, 50 times better because there aren't these interruptive, the writer saying, oh, I want to mention this one thing to you about ancient Rome while we're here at in this tiny town in Vermont or wherever it is. So
Yeah,
you can break the rules if you can get away with it. You can break the rules if your writing partner or your editor think that it was a good idea to do that. You might think that it was fun and iconoclastic and people will think that you're a lot more avant-garde than you are. But if you give it to one of us to read, we're gonna go, it's quirky, it's fun, take it out.
yeah, yeah,
Well, one of the things though, that one of the chapters that you had that really keeps sticking with me that I can't get out of my head is use Anglo-Saxon words.
Yeah.
Now I feel like I've been taught the reverse.
Yeah. Well, academia teaches you the reverse, and Anglo-Saxon words are physical and punchy, and they resonate with experience rather than. And so Anglo-Saxon words have head center, body center, and heart center all resonating. Latinate words reflect the fact that Latin retained a scholarly use that stripped those words and stripped the etymology of those words away from anything except the intellect. So they're used as a common language, a lingua franca across multiple cultures, and they don't pick up resonating cultural associations.
Huh.
yeah.
So, um,
Give an example.
yeah, if I, um, I'm so bad at examples.
Okay, I can
I
look it
hate
up.
that. I always,
I know, I'm sorry, I
yeah.
didn't,
Why
yeah.
don't you give an
Prefer
example?
Anglo,
Yeah, you're good at
I'm a
this.
dropout
Yeah,
and I couldn't even
there we
remember
go.
what the difference was. So,
Okay, so
okay.
crash over collision, hurl over propel, dockhand over stevedores, smelly or rank over malodorous or pungent. Generally speaking, the Latinate word will have more syllables because it'll require a prefix and a suffix and if Latinate words were enough, you could say Newtonian laws of motion proved true when John's automobile disassembled, right? That's a cold explanation of a car crash, right? If I say John's car was totaled,
Mhm.
right? And a picture of a heap emerges in the mind's eye, a sinking feeling in the belly, and a sympathetic gloom in the heart.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean that's very clear, and I think it's something that most of us don't really think about. You know, we know it when we hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Alice, do we have a few more minutes for questions?
We have a couple other questions that I think we can use to, pardon me, wrap up.
Okay,
Um,
Dinah?
Nina, do you find setting deadlines for yourself useful to the creative process, or what does help you finish a project?
Usually I have a deadline. Usually I have something that is due, and that's very inspiring to me. But on a day-to-day basis, you know what I use what I used raising a child, which are bribes and threats. So I'll sit down and I'll say, we are going to write the the passage that takes place at the very muddy beach on the day that we wore our cutest shoes, or something. And I will, you know, with Dr. Spock, the pediatrician, he told parents with 2-year-olds that you need to be firm but friendly. And I'm very firm and friendly with me. I get myself to finish a one passage that might take a couple hours, no matter what. Neal's a journalist. He always had editors breathing down his neck. And he really drives himself to get these. I mean, he's written 2 novels in the last, well, I mean, they 10 years, but finished them in the last
I
year.
also wrote 2
And you
nonfiction
wrote,
books at the same
yeah.
time, but I have a full-time job, but that's because, um, I mean, thankfully, because I was a journalist, I never had the opportunity to develop writer's block, right?
Yeah.
I knew 1 or 2 people who kind of had a daily writer's block in journalism, and they were a pain in the ass to all of the editors, right? Because they never made their deadlines, and they
Mhm.
but mostly you get trained in journalism, you write
You
to
just write.
order.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I don't struggle to finish things sometimes, but what has helped me the last 5 or 10 years is I really explored the fact that if I don't nag myself and I just kind of finish it naturally, um, when I finish it, I feel a great deal of freedom, right?
Hmm.
So we actually assign ourselves puzzles with the expectation that we'll finish them, and a book is a puzzle or an essay is a puzzle. Once I've finished it, I have a big empty space in front of me that I can fill with whatever I want. And I love that sense of, wow, I get to explore something new now, right?
Hmm.
So I want to get the book out of my hands so that I can do another book or go on a river cruise or do whatever the hell I want to do next.
Mhm.
So I picture that empty space
Yeah.
that comes with completion.
Hmm.
There's one last question.
Okay.
Do either or both of you plan to lead workshops based on this book?
Well, that is a good question. I'm not sure how to answer it because the book hasn't come out yet. So we don't know how it's going to be received. And we don't know. I think it would be fun. And we've done retreats together where Neal does the inner critic work and I do the more specific writing work. But I think I know we would both really love to do it together, but we really just don't know what is going to happen with this book, whether it'll be well received, whether there would be people wanting us to run workshops. So,
It's funny. I mean, unless you've written a book, you don't publish a book, you don't realize that actually a book creates its own life that
mhm.
you kind of tag along to,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And
yeah,
you can't predict it
yeah,
because predicting a market for something that hasn't been out there yet is impossible,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so
yeah,
the market
Comes out this
decides.
Tuesday
Yeah, it comes
yeah,
out Tuesday. The
on St. Patrick's Day.
and the
yeah.
market will decide. We don't know whether this is going to end up in schools or end up in journalists' hands or whose hands or who gets interested in it. And we'll find out.
Hmm.
Well, I think it's going to have a broad audience personally. I think
Thank you,
it's going to
Alyssa.
reach, I think it's going to reach, a lot of people. And new writers, seasoned writers, academic writers, there are some really wonderful books about writing. One of my authors from when I was at HarperCollins, a woman named Bonnie Friedman, really, really wonderful wrote a book called Writing Past Dark, and I edited that by the paperback in, I want to say, 1994, and it is still out there, and it has a very, very long and healthy life,
Uh-huh.
in the, in the academic market, and it's out there, and she's coming out with a novel, I think, soon. So that's my prediction, and it is just,
Thank
it's a
you.
it's a it's a it's a really good read. It's a really important read, and we get a little peek inside your working process, and that's a lot of fun for us. So
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
Alissa.
very much. I have, from a bookseller standpoint, we have a whole section on the writing process, and I'm very proud to put this book right in there with it. Uh,
Thank you.
I loved reading it. I was very grateful to be able to read it early. So I want to officially thank Neal, Anne, and Elissa for this wonderful and enriching dialogue, and to all of you who tuned in today. This event
Yeah.
will be posted on our YouTube page, and I know the authors will be sharing it widely later today, excuse me. Each of you will be sent the link in my follow-up email so that you can share it as well. Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
thank you, Alice. Thank you, Neil
Always
and Annie.
fun.
It's great to see
Yeah.
you. Congratulations in advance.
Thank
Everybody read the book.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.